piece that I published on natural selections on my Substack this week is about what is wrong with higher ed. And I talk a lot about the problems with how science is funded and what it has meant to how good scientists are, what they do, and also then how the most ambitious scientists are basically whisked away from the teaching and governance part of universities. But the excerpt that I specifically wanted, there's two excerpts that I wanted to share. One of them is apropos what you are talking about, Brett. I will start by, here we go. So it's higher ed needs a reboot, but being anti-woke won't be sufficient. And it's a long piece, and I'll actually be reading this aloud for everyone for my Tuesday post this week. But I'm going to start right now with just a small excerpt from the very end of the section. Sorry, I'm making people probably dizzy. How science is funded. I was going to read this whole section, but I'm not going to, and then read the woke revolution. If we are to be free, we need the scientific process to be free. Instead, money is driving what questions get asked. As a result, some research that passes for science is not worthy of the name, and other research, which would be science had it been allowed to happen, never gets done. This is perhaps the largest problem of all at modern universities. The woke revolution. Into this environment arrived an ideology which quickly became so widely adopted that it can now justly be called a revolution. As science and scientists were being bought by market forces, the door was left open for more patently craven forms of anti-intellectualism. Flying under the beautiful sounding banner of social justice, embodied by growing legions of diversity, equity, and inclusion officers and administrators, it is most succinctly called woke. What social justice aspires to, or claims to aspire to, is the adoption of policies that recognize past and ongoing bias in society, reduces such bias going forward, and helps those who have been negatively affected by it. In practice, though, it is authoritarian, dogmatic, illiberal, and mean. As linguist John McWhorter writes in his new book, Woke Racism: How a New Religion Has Betrayed Black America, this ideology directly blocks the ability of people who adhere to it from getting ahead. Of the movement's three key words, diversity, equity, and inclusion, only one is an accurate representation of what the movement stands for. The woke do not embrace or pursue diversity. They are on a mission to reduce human experience and thought to a single note, one that agrees with the conclusions that they have already arrived at. And the woke are not inclusive. Indeed, they would exclude all those who disagree with them, to the point of deplatforming and preventing dissenters from speaking. The movement that claims to advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion is therefore both anti-diversity and exclusionary. What may be surprising to those not already immersed in this landscape, however, is that the woke revolution really is about equity. The disconnect is that equity doesn't mean what you probably think it means. The concept of equity has been around since at least 1981, when it was included in the first Principles of the American Society for Public Administration. The ASPA had this to say about a key distinction. Equality, they defined as citizen A being equal to citizen B. Equity, they defined as adjusting shares so that citizen A is made equal with citizen B. Many people, though, when they hear the word equity, synonymize it with equality. We 21st century weird people broadly, nearly universally, value equality. We are all equal under the law, and we ought to defend that fiercely. Equality refers to having equality of opportunity. Equity, in direct contrast, promotes equality of outcome. This is a dystopian idea that was brilliantly satirized in Vonnegut's short story Harris and Bergeron, wherein those with greater ability are handicapped in order to bring society into full compliance. And here's just the first paragraph of Harris and Bergeron. A very short story, worth everyone reading it. The year was 2081, and everybody was finally equal. They weren't only equal before God and the law, they were equal every which way. Nobody was smarter than anybody else. Nobody was better looking than anybody else. Nobody was stronger or quicker than anybody else. All this equality was due to the 211th, 212th, and 213th Amendments to the Constitution, and to the unceasing vigilance of agents of the United States Handicapper General. So this is absolutely apropos a discussion of medically woke, right? I mean, this is the same kind of process, as you were pointing out, you say on Twitter this morning, but I've heard you point it out elsewhere.
Yeah, it is the same kind of, it's uncanny how much the same kind of process it is.
Yes.
And, we have been on the wrong end of it twice now in two very different contexts. Mm-hmm. And so it's just like, you can see that it's the same.
Okay, but I'm playing the interviewer here now.
Yeah.
Aren't you just looking for trouble, though? Aren't you just interested in conflict?
No, I would say I believe the actual diagnosis is a bit insensitive to social signals or indifferent to them in some sense. And so I think the point is, if you're sensitive at a normal level, you get don't go there, girlfriend, away from the dangerous thing, right? And it doesn't work for everybody on every topic. But if your point is, actually, I don't speak that language, I don't know what don't go there, girlfriend means, right? And you just keep pursuing things, then what you keep finding is the
devil
delta.
on our shoulder is, you're not the boss of me.
Right. But the point is, you will keep discovering the delta between the official story and what you can deduce if you do your own work. And the problem is, if that delta is small, it's not a big deal. If the delta is big, then you just keep discovering this chasm, and you're like the idiot who doesn't get the message that pointing that out is bad for you, right?
Yeah. Still naked, guys. Emperor is still naked.
Still naked, right.
It's a different emperor. Really? Are you sure? Because it kind of looks like the same guy, because I saw him naked before. He's still there. Still no clothes.
Still dresses to the right. So anyway, it's a fascinating social process, and one that I will say I've had the sense at the beginning of this last week.
This last week, okay.
Yeah, I mean, it was an increasing sense over time that enough people around the world were waking up to what was happening, that it was like reason was returning, right? And I fear that new variant, is
hide under your bed.
Right. This isn't the Great Reset. This is there was some process running in the computer that the owner of the computer was displeased by, and they couldn't figure out how to turn it off. So they've unplugged it. And, now everything is new again, as it were.
It's the new reset.
It's the new reset. Yeah. And you. Exactly.
Well, I hope you're wrong. Obviously, I hope you're wrong in this case. And, we have hoped we were wrong in many cases.
Yep.
Unfortunately, the things that we have hoped we were wrong about, we haven't, for the most part, with trivial examples, I'm sure, but seen the evidence that has been the case.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, I will just say one last thing.
Yeah.
That Harrison Bergeron thing, it has a particular relevance in our story, actually, relative to our encounter with Woke One.
Yeah.
Right? Which was that as Evergreen melted down around us, a student of mine, a current student of mine who had been in the current then, had been in the class in which I had put the model for witch hunts and how they work up on the board, somebody who was watching this happen in real time, a Black woman, took me aside as protests and everything else was going on. And she said, you have to read this story. Harrison Bergeron is like, I have less time for reading stories this week than ever before in my life. And she's like, no, you have to read this story. Right. And she ultimately did persuade me even then to read the thing. And it was like, okay, very interesting.
Yeah.
So
that's right. It is. Too bad we don't have Kurt Vonnegut anymore. His take would be very interesting.
If only he had written things that we could return to.
But we do, and I have yet to read anything of his that I didn't find deeply valuable. But a link to an online version of the story is in my piece here, so you can find it there.